So disruptions at Wits University continued today. The focus, of course, has shifted from university fees only to the condition of workers as well. A small group of protesters say they stand in solidarity with contract workers. Along with workers, they are calling for an end to outsourcing, when services such as cleaning are contracted out and the workers are coordinated by the external company rather than Wits itself. So the students won't like this view. Deloitte says that outsourcing could be good for job creation in South Africa. To discuss his view, we're joined by Sandile Gwala from the business process as a service line at Deloitte. Good evening to you, Sandile.
Good evening.
Okay, can we just talk about the history? And I'm focusing on Wits, but of course this is an issue across our economy. I went to Wits years ago and I remember this being discussed, and I can't remember the situation then. But the call was always for companies to focus on their core business, what they're good at. So in the case of Wits, it's academic activities, and outsource the rest. Of course, a lot of companies then did this. Then there were claims of exploitation, that the companies were doing this to avoid basically keeping those workers in decent jobs where they can rely on benefits and things like that. The law, however, has changed. Just tell me where we stand right now and how you see it.
Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me to join you today. I think the discussion that we are having today is slightly different from what the students are talking about. The billboards that we've all seen are billboards that are saying end outsourcing. But the reality of the challenges that we're talking about, it is not the practice of outsourcing that is at debate today. The issues are labor rights. So whether it was insourced, whether it is outsourced, employees have got rights and those rights need to be respected. The benefits of employees need to be respected.
Whether you work now for Wits or the external company,
that has to be respected, and the labor law in South Africa does provide for those protections. So if you talk, for instance, the situation at hand, right, that was we look at Wits University, there is already what we call Section 197. So if Wits, for instance, is transferring employees from Wits to an outsourced service provider, there is no way an outsourcing service provider, according to Section 197 of Labour Relations Act, that those rights can be changed. So the rights that you have...
You still need compulsory leave, for example, all the benefits that you...
Everything that you had at Wits needs to remain as it is.
So what is the problem here, do you think? Because I was thinking about it, maybe if you work for a contract company, they can move you around a lot. So that seems a little bit insecure. Say, Wits doesn't need you today, you can be moved to UJ, but you can't necessarily lose your job just because you're not needed. Is that a problem?
I wouldn't really be an expert in as far as the university outsourcing is concerned, but I think what is at issue here is the fact that the universities, as you said, I was also at universities over 20 years ago. Catering was already outsourced those days. And the people that were outsourced those days have changed. So the people that have joined recently did not necessarily benefit on the employment rights that the employees of 20 years ago had. The people that are coming now are coming as contractors. So you will come, get a contract, and you only get your salary. You do not have the right to bring your children, for instance, at university for free. You do not have rights sometimes to the provident fund that the company has, as in Wits in this case. So when that happens, the situation that we are seeing today is very likely, because we are talking about employees of today. You're saying, why are they not getting all the benefits that employees of 20 years ago were able to get?
Okay, that's a good way of putting it. So even though the outsourcing company is meeting its legal obligations, you don't have those old-time perks, for instance, lower education and things like that.
Definitely, because when you look at the labor law as it stands now, you are allowed, if I get an outsourcing contract for 3 years, I am allowed to employ contractors for a period of 3 years. Now, if you come in, it is very difficult that you get long-term employment benefits if you are only employed for 3 years. And I think that's where the biggest challenge needs to come in. And University of Wits, University of Cape Town, and all those institutions need to say, if our employees, we've got these requirements of these services continuously, and we might be changing service providers, how do we protect those employees as you change these service providers? How do you make sure that they still get civil rights and employment rights that they would have got, for instance, if they were at vets? And I think that's probably a biggest challenge that the university might be faced with.
Okay, I wish we could continue talking about this because it's so topical, but tell me why you say overall outsourcing is very good for job creation and why we should welcome it.
Okay, maybe let me put a proviso. So when we talk about outsourcing, what I'm talking about when I was putting this report together, I'm talking about professional services. So what we were talking about just now, we're talking about, for instance, we're talking about catering, we're talking about cleaning services. What I'm talking about here are people that are doing call center work, are people that are doing outsourcing of accounting services, are people that are doing accounting or analytical work like data analytics and so forth. So why is it an advantage for South Africa? It's probably 2 or 3 advantages right now. One, there is a maturity of outsourcing globally, which countries like India today, they employ about 2.8 million people just out of outsourcing. Countries like Philippines today are employing over 800,000 people just in outsourcing. South Africa only employs about 200,000, which is really a drop in the ocean if you look how many young people that we have that are unemployed, whether they have matric or they are unemployed graduates. That's where the opportunity for South Africa is sitting.
I love that you bring up India. I mean, I once phoned a tech provider and I landed up speaking to somebody in India. So they have been brilliant at call center work, at building websites, things like that. They found this market and they're even benefiting from different time zones. Where can we find a gap now?
Okay. Where the gap is, in, let's say, for instance, starting from 1991, 1992, the advantage for outsourcing was in labor arbitrage. So who can provide cheapest labor in the world? Today, that has changed. The question is who can provide high-end professional services, as I said earlier on, who can provide chartered accountants, who can provide actuaries. And South Africa has got those kind of capabilities locally. But over and above that, we are now starting to move away from labor arbitrage in terms of cheaper labor. We're moving into technology capability, which is a terminology we call as a service. So I can provide a software as a service out of South Africa in a manner that is cheaper as it would have been if it was provided in India. That gives us an advantage as South Africa. And the incentives that the Trade and Industry Ministry has provided now even gives us a better advantage to say, you can take unemployed graduates as we stand now, which are sitting probably almost 800,000. You reskill them, they are able to do the low-end work through computers, whether you're capturing invoices for a company sitting in the UK and you will be overseen or supervised by a qualified accountant in a ratio of 1 chartered accountant to probably 15 capturers. So you are able to bring unemployed youth in big volumes, to be quite honest, because I mean, just this week alone, I've seen about 4 international companies that are looking at relocating some work from overseas to South Africa. Okay,
let's end on this. You provide young people with work. Will we give them, because obviously this seems to be a big issue in South Africa, will they receive the benefits, the job security, things like that? Or do we have to be flexible if we want this to work?
Not necessarily. I mean, what I talk about in my report, I talk about professionalization of outsourcing. If you look at what we were talking about earlier on, that you outsource and you take away all the benefits, you wouldn't be able to do that with chartered accountants. They've got many options in South Africa and overseas. So the area and the space which we are able to play in will require us to respect the requirements of those employees. So for instance, if I look at Deloitte, we employ about 500 plus professionals that are providing these services. Those people are just like any other employee. They get their benefits, they get their group life cover, they get their medical aid, simply because we see them as long-term employees in our organization.
Even though you're often contracting.
That is professionalization, because with certainty, I know that that market is going to grow. And the requirement that we are seeing around the world tells me that it is a market that is going to demand even more people than what we are employing today.
So consulting, any other, very quickly, any other lights? You say some South African companies are operating abroad. So it's mainly consulting services at the moment.
It is not necessarily just consulting services. I mean, if I look, for instance, what is happening now, you find that a lot of global companies have outsourced to India. But what they are looking for now, they are looking for somebody who can create a center of excellence. So who can provide analytical work, or who can provide forensic outsourcing.
I have to stop you there, but we need to step up. Thank you so much. This has been interesting. Sandile Gwala from Deloitte.